Welcome to Heavy D Storytelling. I'm David Sneathen and I'm going to tell you a story. This is JJ and he's already told a story today.
Yay!
Okay. So, Kimberly, share the link, please.
Yes. But I am I'm happy about
It is okay. Pajamas. No, you don't. I don't need that. Okay, today is May 5th. Oh, again, lots and lots of links pop up. Thanks for sharing it with me, Kim. That was really helpful. Okay. So we're going to wait for Rebecca. Oh, there she is. Perfect. We're just about to start John chapter 5. I see two people on. Great. All right, this is John chapter 5. Okay, shush, please. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethsaida, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, the man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is the man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, and there was a crowd in the place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." This was why the Jews were seeking him all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So Jesus said to them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, that the Son does likewise. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all that he himself is doing, and greater works than these will he show him, so that you may marvel. For as the Father raises the dead and gives them life, so also the Son gives life to whom he will. For the Father judges no one, but has given all judgment to the Son, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever hears my word and believes him who sent me has eternal life. He does not come into judgment, but has passed from death to life. Truly, truly, I say to you, an hour is coming and is now here when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son also to have life in himself. And he has given him authority to execute judgment, because he is the Son of Man. Do not marvel at this, for an hour is coming when all who are in the tombs will hear his voice and come out, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. I can do nothing on my own. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is just, because I seek not my own will, but the will of him who sent me. If I alone bear witness about myself, my testimony is not true. There is another who bears witness about me, and I know that the testimony that he bears about me is true. You sent to John, and he has borne witness to the truth. Not that the testimony that I receive is from man, but I say these things so that you may be saved. He was a burning and shining lamp, and you were willing to rejoice for a while in his light. But the testimony that I have is greater than that of John. For the works that the Father has given me to accomplish, the very works that I am doing, bear witness about me that the Father has sent me. And the Father who sent me has himself borne witness about me. His voice you have never heard, his form you have never seen, and you do not have his word abiding in you, for you do not believe the one whom he has sent. You search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life, and it is they that bear witness about me. Yet you refuse to come to me that you may have life. I do not receive glory from people, but I know that you do not have the love of God within you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. How can you believe when you receive glory from one another and do not seek the glory that comes from the only God? Do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, on whom you have set your hope. For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe? For he wrote of me, sorry. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? And if we want some great scriptures where Moses wrote of Jesus, we can read them maybe in a future month. We can do Exodus or something, and that'll be really great. So at this time, we have come to the time in our episode in which Kimberly is going to give her synopsis. Here she is. Kimberly.
Hello. So yesterday we read. Thanks. But yesterday we read about the battle, and basically what happened was the Narnians came in. They won the battle, and then the person who was in charge, the prince guy of the other kingdom, he got hung up on a hook because he was jumping off of something. And that's about it. Oh, and also something happened with Shasta and the king of the person with the others, with me and everyone else. No, I forget. I think it was like a hermit.
A hermit.
Yeah. Hermit is something or other.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, hi. Welcome back. So, we are going to finish this book tonight. I am fairly confident that we will finish this book, and it will be really quick because we've got 2 chapters. And who's ready? All right. Mom raised her hand, so that's it. All right. Well, she overrides everybody else's vote, so that's good. Okay, perfect. All right, chapter 14, how Bree became a wiser horse. We must now return to Aravis and the horses. The hermit, watching his pool, was able to tell them that Shasta was not killed or even seriously wounded, for he was able to tell them, for he saw him get up and saw how affectionately he was greeted by King Lune. Oh, that's something you missed in the synopsis. But it's really important because they were standing side by side, Shasta and Corin, Prince Corin, right? Did you say that? Okay, and they look identical. They're like perfect twins. All right, so anyway, sorry, I interrupted myself. He was greeted by King Lune, but as he could only see, not hear, he did not know what anyone was saying, and once the fighting had stopped and the talking had begun, it was not worthwhile looking in the pool any longer. Next morning, while the hermit was indoors, the 3 of them discussed what they should do next. "I've had enough of this," said Hwin. "The hermit has been very good to us, and I'm very much obliged to him, I'm sure. But I'm getting as fat as a pet pony, eating all day and getting no exercise. Let's go on to Narnia." What is going on in your room? Okay, perfect. Oh, not today, said Bree. He's just playing with his toys. Oh, not today, ma'am, said Bree. I wouldn't hurry things. Some other day, don't you think? We must see Shasta first and say goodbye to him and apologize, said Aravis. Exactly, said Bree with his great enthusiasm. Just what I was going to say. Oh, of course, said Hwin. I expect he is in Anvard. Naturally, we'd in on him and say goodbye, but that's on our way. And why shouldn't we start at once? After all, I thought it was Narnia we wanted to get to. I suppose so, said Aravis. She was beginning to wonder what exactly she would do when she got there, and was feeling a little lonely. Of course, said Bree hastily, but there's no need to rush things, if you know what I mean. No, I don't know what you mean, said Hwin. Why don't you want to go? Muttered Bree. Well, don't you see, ma'am? It's an important occasion, returning to one's own country, entering society, the best society. It is so essential to make a good impression, not perhaps looking quite ourselves yet, eh? Hwin broke out into a horse laugh. It's your tail, Bree. I see it all now. You want to wait till your tail's grown again, and we don't even know if tails are worn long in Narnia. Really, Bree, you're as vain as that Tarkina in Tashbaan. You are silly, Bree, said Aravis. By the lion's mane, Tarkina, I'm nothing of the sort, said Bree indignantly. I have a proper respect for myself and for my fellow horses, that's all. Bree, said Aravis, who was not very interested in the cut of his tail, I've been wanting to ask you something for a long time. Why do you keep swearing by the lion and by the lion's mane? I thought you hated lions. So I do, answered Bree, but when I speak of the lion, of course I mean Aslan, the great deliverer of Narnia, who drove away the witch and the winter. All Narnians swear by him. But is he a lion? No, of course not, said Bree in a rather sharp voice. All the stories about him in Tashbaan say he is, replied Aravis. And if he isn't a lion, why do you call him a lion? Well, you'd hardly understand that at your age, said Bree. I was only a little fool when I left, so I don't really quite understand it myself. Bree was standing with his back to the green wall while he said this, and the other two were facing him. He was talking in a rather superior tone with his eyes half shut. That was why he didn't see the changed expression in the faces of Hwin and Aravis. They had good reason to have open mouths and staring eyes, because while Bree spoke, they saw an enormous lion leap up from outside and balance itself on top of the green wall. Only it was a brighter yellow, and it was bigger and more beautiful and more alarming than any lion they had ever seen. And at once it jumped down inside the wall and began approaching Bree from behind. It made no noise at all, and Hwin and Aravis couldn't make any noise themselves, no more than if they were frozen. No doubt, continued Bree, when they speak of him as a lion, they only mean he's as strong as a lion. Or, to our enemies, of course, as fierce as a lion, or something of that kind. Even a little girl like you, Aravis, must see that it would be quite absurd to suppose he is a real lion. Indeed, it would be disrespectful. If he was a lion, he'd have to be a beast, just like the rest of us. Why, and here Bree began to laugh, if he was a lion, he'd have 4 paws and a tail and whiskers. Help! For just as he said the word whiskers, one of Aslan's had actually tickled his ear. Bree shot away like an arrow to the other side of the enclosure and there turned. The wall was too high for him to jump, and he could fly no farther. Aravis and Hwin both started back. There was about a second of intense silence. Then Hwin, though shaking all over, gave a strange little neigh and trotted across to the lion. Please, she said, sorry. You're so beautiful. You may eat me if you like. I'd sooner be eaten by you than fed by anyone else. Dearest daughter, said Aslan, planting a lion's kiss on her twitching velvet nose, I knew you would not be long in coming to me. Joy shall be yours. Then he lifted his head and spoke in a louder voice. Now, Bree, he said, you poor, proud, frightened horse, draw near. Nearer still, my son. Do not dare not to dare. Touch me, smell me. Here are my paws. Here is my tail. These are my whiskers. I am a true beast. Aslan, said Bree in a shaken voice, I am afraid I must be rather a fool. Happy the horse who knows that while he is still young, or the human either. Draw near, Aravis, my daughter. See, my paws are velveted. You will not be torn this time. This time, sir? Said Aravis. It was I who wounded you, said Aslan. I am the only lion you met in all your journeyings. Do you not know why I tore you? No, sir. The scratches on your back, tear for tear, throb for throb, blood for blood, were equal to the stripes laid on the back of your stepmother's slave because of the drugged sleep you cast upon her. You need to know what it felt like. Yes, please, sir. Ask on, my dear, said Aslan. Will any more harm come to her by what I did? Child, said the lion, I am telling you your story, not hers. No one is told any story but their own. Then he shook his head and spoke in a lighter voice. Be merry, little ones, he said. We shall meet soon again, but before you will have another visitor. Then in one bound he reached the top of the wall and vanished from their sight. Strange to say, they felt no inclination to talk to one another about him after he had gone. They all moved slowly away to different parts of the quiet grass and there paced to and fro, each alone thinking. About half an hour later, the two horses were summoned to the back of the house to eat something nice that the hermit had got ready for them, and Aravis, still walking and thinking, was startled by the harsh sound of a trumpet outside the gate. Who is there? Said Aravis. His Royal Highness Prince Cor of Archenland, said a voice from outside. Aravis undid the door and opened it, drawing back a little way to let the strangers in. Two soldiers with halberds came first and took their stand at either side of the entry. Then followed a herald and the trumpeter. His Royal Highness Prince Cor of Archenland declares an audience of the Lady Aravis, said the herald. Then he and the trumpeter drew aside and bowed, and the soldiers saluted, and the prince himself came in. All his attendants withdrew and closed the gate behind them. The prince bowed, and a very clumsy bow for a prince it was. Aravis curtsied in the Calormene style, which is not at all like ours, and did it very well because of course she had been taught how. Then she looked up and saw what sort of person this prince was. She saw a mere boy. He was bareheaded, and his fair hair was encircled with a very thin band of gold, hardly thicker than a wire. His upper tunic was of white cambric, as fine as a handkerchief, so that the bright red tunic beneath it showed through. His left hand, which rested on his enameled sword hilt, was bandaged. Aravis looked twice at his face before she gasped and said, Why, It's Shasta! Shasta all at once turned very red and began speaking very quickly. Look here, Aravis, he said. I do hope you won't think I'm got up like this, and the trumpeter and all, to try to impress you or make out that I'm different or any rot of that sort, because I'd far rather have come in my old clothes, but they're burnt now, and my father said, Your father? Said Aravis. Apparently King Loon is my father, said Shasta. I might really have guessed it, Corin being so like me. We were twins, you see. Oh, and my name isn't Shasta, it's Cor. Cor is a nicer name than Shasta, said Aravis. Brothers' names run like that in Archenland, said Shasta, or Prince Cor, as we must call him now. Like Dar and Darren, Cole and Colin, and so on. Shasta, I mean Cor, said Aravis. No, shut up. There's something I've got to say at once. I'm sorry I've been such a pig, but I did change before I knew you were a prince. Honestly, I did. When you went back and faced the lion. It wasn't really going to kill you at all, that lion, said Cor. I know, said Aravis, nodding. Both were still and solemn for a moment, as each saw that the other knew about Aslan. Suddenly Aravis remembered Cor's bandaged hand, and I say, she cried, I forgot. You've been in a battle. Is that a wound? A mere scratch, said Cor, using for the first time a rather lordly tone. But a moment later he burst out laughing and said, If you want to know the truth, it isn't a proper wound at all. I only took the skin off my knuckles, just as any clumsy fool might do without going near a battle. Still, you were in the battle, said Aravis. It must have been wonderful. It wasn't at all like what I thought, said Cor. But Cor, you haven't told me anything yet about King Loon and how he found out who you are. Well, let's sit down, said Cor, for it's rather a long story. And by the way, Father's an absolute brick. I'd be just as pleased, or very nearly, at finding he's my father, even if he wasn't a king, even though education and all sorts of horrible things are going to happen to me. But you want the story. Well, Corin and I were twins, and about a week after we were both born, apparently they took us to a wise old centaur in Narnia to be blessed or something. Now, this centaur was a prophet, as a good many centaurs are. Perhaps you haven't seen any centaurs yet. There were some in the battle yesterday, most remarkable people, but I can't say I feel quite at home with them yet. I say, Aravis, there are going to be a lot of things to get used to in these northern countries. Yes, there are, said Aravis, but get on with the story. Well, as soon as he saw Corin and me, it seems the centaur looked at me and said, A day will come when that boy will save Archenland from the deadliest danger in whichever she lay. So of course my father and mother were very pleased, but there was someone present who wasn't. This was a chap called Lord Barr, who had been father's Lord Chancellor, and apparently he'd done something wrong, bezzling or some word like that. I didn't understand that part very well, and father had to dismiss him. But nothing else was done to him, and he was allowed. Yeah, okay, that's great, Ben. I'm glad that you're showing me something. Why don't you join the live stream? Join the live stream. Okay. All right. But he must have been as bad as could be, for it came out afterward that he had been in the pay of the Tisroc and had sent a lot of secret information. I'm stargazing. Okay. A lot of secret information to Tashban. So as soon as he heard I was going to save Archenland from a great danger, he decided I must be put out of the way. Well, he succeeded in kidnapping me. I don't exactly know how, and rode away down the Winding Arrow, that was the name of the river, to the coast. He'd had everything prepared, and there was a ship manned with his own followers lying ready for him, and he put out to sea with me on board. But father got wind of it, though not quite in time, and was after him as quickly as he could. The Lord Bar was already at sea when father reached the coast, but not out of sight, and father was embarked in one of his own warships within 20 minutes. It must have been a wonderful chase. They were 6 days following Bar's galleon and brought her to battle on the 7th. It was a great sea fight. I heard a lot about it yesterday evening, from 10 o'clock in the morning till sunset. Our people took the ship in the end, but I wasn't there. The Lord Bar himself had been killed in the battle, but one of his men had said that early in the morning, as soon as he saw he was certain to be overhauled, Bar had given me to one of his knights and sent us both away in the ship's boat, and that boat was never seen again. But of course, that was the same boat that Aslan, he seems to be at the back of all the stories, pushed ashore at the right place for Arshish to pick me up. I wish I knew that knight's name, for he must have kept me alive and starved himself to do it. Hey, boys. Okay, let's settle down now, please. All right. Sorry about that. Starved himself to do it. I suppose Aslan would say that was part of someone else's story, said Aravis. I was forgetting about that, said Kor. And I wonder how the prophecy will work out, said Aravis, and what the great danger is that you're going to save Archenland from. Well, said Kor rather awkwardly, they seem to think I've done it already. Aravis clapped her hands. Why, of course, she said. How stupid I am, and how wonderful. Archenland have never been in such greater danger than it was when Rabidash had crossed the Arrow with his 200 horse, and you hadn't yet got through with your message. Don't you feel proud? I think I feel a bit scared, said Kor. And you'll be living in Anvard now, said Aravis rather wistfully. Oh, said Kor, I'd nearly forgotten what I came about. Father wants you to come and live with us. He says there's been no lady in the court, they call it the court, I don't know why, since Mother died. Do, Aravis, you'll like Father and Corin. They're not like me, they've been properly brought up. You needn't be afraid that— Oh, stop it, said Aravis, or we'll have a real fight. Of course I'll come. Now let's go and see the horses, said Kor. There was a great and joyous meeting between Bree and Kor, and Bree, who was still in a rather subdued frame of mind, agreed to set out for Anvard at once. He and Hwin would cross into Narnia on the following day. All four bade an affectionate farewell to the hermit and promised that they would soon visit him again. By about the middle of the morning, they were on their way. The horses had expected that Aravis and Kor would ride, but Kor explained that except in war, where everyone must do what he can do best, no one in Narnia or Archenland ever dreamed of mounting a talking horse. This reminded poor Bree again of how little he knew about Narnian customs and what dreadful mistakes he might make. So while Hwin strolled along in a happy dream, Bree got more nervous and more self-conscious with every step he took. Buck up, Bree, said Kor. It's far worse for me than for you. You aren't going to be educated. I shall be learning reading and writing and heraldry and dancing and history and music, while you'll be galloping and rolling in the hills of Narnia to your heart's content. But that's just the point, groaned Bree. Do talking horses roll? Supposing they don't. I can't bear to give it up. What do you think, Hwin? I'm going to roll anyway, said Hwin. I don't suppose any of them will care 2 lumps of sugar whether you roll or not. Are we near that castle? Said Bree to Kor. Round the next bend, said the prince. Well, said Bree, I'm going to have a good one now. It may be the last. Wait for me a moment. It was 5 minutes before he rose again, blowing hard and covered with bits of bracken. Now I'm ready, he said in a voice of profound gloom. Lead on, Prince Kor, Narnia and the North. But he looked more like a horse going to a funeral than a long-lost captive returning to home and freedom. Chapter 15, Rabadash the Ridiculous. The next turn of the road brought them out from among the trees, and there, across green lawns, sheltered from the north wind by the high wooded ridge at its back, they saw the castle of Anvard. It was very old and built of a warm reddish-brown stone. Before they had reached the gate, King Lune came out to meet them, not looking at all like Aravis's idea of a king and wearing the oldest of old clothes, for he had just come from making a round of the kennels with his huntsman and had only stopped for a moment to wash his doggy hands. But the bow with which he greeted Aravis, with which he had greeted Aravis as he took her hand, would have been stately enough for an emperor. "Little lady," he said, "we bid you very heartily welcome. If my dear wife were still alive, we could make you a better cheer, but could not do it with a better will. And I am sorry that you have had misfortunes and have been driven from your father's house, which cannot but be a grief to you. My son Cor has told me about your adventures together and all your valor." "It was he who did all that, sir," said Aravis. "Why, he rushed at a lion to save me." "Eh? What's that?" said King Lune, his face brightening. "I haven't heard that part of the story." Then Aravis told it, and Cor, who had very much wanted the story to be known, though he felt he couldn't tell it himself, didn't enjoy it so much as he had expected, and indeed felt rather foolish. But his father enjoyed it very much indeed, and in the course of the next few weeks told it to so many people that Cor wished it had never happened. Then the king turned to Hwin and Bree and was just as polite to them as to Aravis, and asked them a lot of questions about their families and where they had lived in Narnia before they had been captured. The horses were rather tongue-tied, for they weren't used to being talked to as equals by humans, grown-up humans, that is. They didn't mind Aravis and Cor. Presently, Queen Lucy came out from the castle and joined them, and King Lune said to Aravis, "My dear, here is a loving friend of our house, and she has been seeing that your apartments are put to rights for you better than I could have done it. You'd like to come and see them, wouldn't you?" said Lucy, kissing Aravis. Sorry about that. They liked each other at once and soon went away together to talk about Aravis's bedroom and Aravis's boudoir and about getting clothes for her and all the sort of things girls do talk about on such an occasion. After lunch, which they had on the terrace, it was cold birds and cold game pie and wine and bread and cheese. King Lune ruffled up his brow and heaved a sigh and said, "Hey ho! We have still that sorry creature Rabadash on our hands, my friends, and must needs resolve what to do with him." Lucy was sitting on the king's right and Aravis on his left. King Edmund sat at one end of the table, and the Lord Darren faced him at the other. Dar and Peridin and Cor and Corin were on the same side as the king. "Your Majesty would have the perfect right to strike off his head," said Peridin. "Such an assault as he made puts him on a level with assassins." "It is very true," said Edmund, "but even a traitor may mend. I have known one that did, and he looked very thoughtful. To kill this Rabadash would go near to raising war with the Tisroc," said Darren. "A fig for the Tisroc," said King Lune. "His strength is in numbers, and numbers will never cross the desert. But I have no stomach for killing men, even traitors in cold blood. To have cut his throat in battle would have eased my heart mightily, but this is a different thing." "By my counsel," said Lucy, "your Majesty shall give him another trial. Let him go free on straight promise of fair dealing in the future. It may be that he will keep his word." "Maybe apes will grow honest, sister," said Edmund, "but by the lion, if he breaks it again, may it be in such time and place that any of us could swap off his head in clean battle. It shall be tried, said the king, and then to one of the attendants, send for the prisoner, friend. Rabadash was brought before them in chains. To look at him, anyone would have supposed that he had passed the night in a noisome dungeon without food or water, but in reality he had been shut up in quite a comfortable room and provided with an excellent supper. But as he was sulking far too furiously to touch the supper and had spent the whole night stomping and roaring and cursing, he naturally did not now look his best. Your Royal Highness needs not be told, said King Lune, that by the law of nations, as well as by all reasons of prudent policy, we have as good right to your head as ever one mortal man had against another. Nevertheless, in consideration of your youth and the ill nurture devoid of all gentilese and courtesy, which you have doubtless had in the land of slaves and tyrants, we are disposed to set you free, unharmed, on these conditions. First, that— Curse you for a barbarian dog, spluttered Rabadash. Do you think I will even hear your conditions? So, you talk very largely of nurture, and I know not what. It's easy to a man in chains. Ha! Take off these vile bonds, give me a sword, and let any of you who dares then debate with me. Nearly all the lords sprang to their feet, and Corin shouted, Father, can I box him, please? Peace, your majesties, my lords, said King Lune. Have we no more gravity among us than to be so chafed by the taunt of a pajok? Sit down, Corin, or shalt leave the table. I ask your highness again to hear our conditions. I hear no conditions from barbarians and sorcerers, said Rabadash. Not one of you dare touch a hair of my head. Every insult you have heaped on me shall be paid with oceans of Narnian and Archenlandish blood. Terrible shall the vengeance of the Tisroc be, even now. But kill me, and the burnings and torturings in the northern lands shall become a tale to frighten the world 1,000 years hence. Beware, beware, beware! The bolt of ash falls from above. Does it ever get caught on a hook halfway? Asked Corin. Shame, Corin, said the king. Never taunt a man save when he is stronger than you, then as you please. Oh, you foolish Rabadash, sighed Lucy. Next moment, Cor wondered why everyone at the table had risen and was standing perfectly still. Of course, he did the same himself, and then he saw the reason. Aslan was among them, though no one had seen him coming. Rabadash started as the immense shape of the lion paced softly in between him and his accusers. Rabadash, said Aslan, take heed. Your doom is very near, but you may still avoid it. Forget your pride, what have you to be proud of, and your anger, who has done you wrong, and accept the mercy of these good kings. Then Rabadash rolled his eyes and spread out his mouth into a horrible, long, mirthless grin like a shark, and wagged his ears up and down. Anyone can learn how to do this if they take the trouble. He had always found this very effective in Calormen. The bravest had trembled when he made these faces, and ordinary people had fallen to the floor, and sensitive people had often fainted. But what Rabadash hadn't realized is that it is very easy to frighten people who know you can have them boiled alive the moment you give the word. The grimaces didn't look at all alarming in Archenland. Indeed, Lucy only thought Rabadash was going to be sick. Demon! 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 Shrieked the prince. I know you! You are the foul fiend of Narnia! You are the enemy of the gods! Learn who I am, horrible phantasm! I am descended from Tash, the inexorable, the irresistible, the curse of Tash is upon you. Lightning in the shape of scorpions shall be rained upon you. The mountains of Narnia shall be ground into dust. Have a care, Rabadash, said Aslan quietly. The doom is nearer now. It is at the door. It has lifted the latch. Let the skies fall, shrieked Rabadash. Let the earth gape. Let blood and fire obliterate the world. But be sure I will never desist till I have dragged to my palace by her hair the barbarian queen, the daughter of dogs. But the hour has struck, said Aslan, and Rabadash saw, to his supreme horror, that everyone had begun to laugh. They couldn't help it. Rabadash had been wagging his ears all the time, and as soon as Aslan said the hour has struck, the ears began to change. They grew longer and more pointed, and soon were covered with gray hair. And while everyone was wondering where they had seen ears like that before, Rabadash's face began to change too. It grew longer and thicker at the top and larger-eyed, and the nose sank back into the face, or else the face swelled out and became all nose, and there was hair all over it. And his arms grew longer and came down in front of him till his hands were resting on the ground. Only they weren't hands now, they were hoofs. And he was standing on all fours, and his clothes disappeared. And everyone laughed louder and louder because they couldn't help it. For now what had been Rabadash was simply and unmistakably a donkey. The terrible thing was that his human speech lasted just a moment longer than his human shape, so that when he realized the change that was coming over him, he screamed out, "Oh, not a donkey! Mercy! If it were a horse, and so the words died away into a donkey's bray. Now hear me, Rabadash, said Aslan. Justice shall be mixed with mercy. You shall not always be a donkey. At this, of course, the donkey twitched its ears forward, and that also was so funny that everybody laughed all the more. They tried not to, but they tried in vain. You have appealed to Tash, said Aslan, and in the temple of Tash you shall be healed. You must stand before the altar of Tash in Tashbaan at the great autumn feast this year, and there, in the sight of all Tashbaan, your donkey's shape will fall from you, and all men will know you for Prince Rabadash. But as long as you live, if ever you go more than 10 miles away from that great temple in Tashbaan, you shall instantly become again as you are now. And from that second change, there will be no return. There was a short silence, and then they all stirred and looked at one another as if they were waking from sleep. Aslan was gone, but there was a brightness in the air and on the grass, and a joy in their hearts, which assured them that he had been no dream. And anyway, there was a donkey in front of them. King Lune was the kindest hearted man King Lune was the kindest hearted of men, and on seeing his enemy in this regrettable condition, he forgot all his anger. Your Royal Highness, he said, I am most truly sorry that things have come to this extremity. Your Highness will bear witness, Mom's not in there, and you need to go to bed. Your Highness will bear witness that it was none of our doing, and of course we shall be delighted to provide your Highness with shipping back to Tashbaan. We can wait. For treatment which Aslan has prescribed. You shall have every comfort for which your Highness's situation allows, the best of the cattle boats, the freshest carrots and thistles. but a deafening bray from the donkey and a well-aimed kick at one of the guards made it clear that these kindly offers were ungratefully received. And here, to get him out of the way, I'd better finish off the story of Rabadash. He, or it, was duly sent back by boat to Tashban and brought into the temple of Tash at the great autumn festival. And then he became a man again. But of course, 4,000 or 5,000 people had seen the transformation, and the affair could not possibly be hushed up. And after the old Tisroch's death, when Rabadash became Tisroch in the place, he turned out to be the most peaceable Tisroch Calormen had ever known. This was because, not daring to go more than 10 miles from Tashban, he could never go on a war himself, and he didn't want his Tarkans to win fame in the wars at his expense. For that is the way Tisrochs get overthrown. But though his reasons were selfish, it made things much more comfortable for all the smaller countries round Calormen. His own people never forgot that he had been a donkey. During his reign, and to his face, he was called Rabadash the Peacemaker, but after his death and behind his back, he was called Rabadash the Ridiculous. And if you look him up in a good history of Calormen, try the local library, you will find him under that name. And to this day in Calormen schools, if you do anything unusually stupid, you are very likely to be called a second Rabadash. Meanwhile, in Anvard, everyone was very glad that he had been disposed of before the real fun began, which was a grand feast held that evening on the lawn before the castle, with dozens of lanterns to help the moonlight, and the wine flowed, and tales were told, and jokes were cracked, and then silence was made, and the king's poet with 2 fiddlers stepped out into the middle of the circle. Aravis and Kor prepared themselves to be bored, for the only poetry they knew was the Calormen kind, and you know now what that was like. But at the very first scrape of the fiddles, a rocket seemed to go up inside their heads, and the poets sang the great old lay from fair Olivin, and how he fought the giant Pyre, and turned him into stone, and that is the origin of Mount Pyre. It was a 2-headed giant, and won the lady Liln for his bride, and when it was over, they wished it was going to begin again. And though Bree couldn't sing, he told the story of the fight of Zalindra, and Lucy told again that they had all except Aravis and Kor heard it many times, but they all wanted it again. The tale of the wardrobe, and how she and King Edmund and Queen Susan and Peter, the High King, had first come into Narnia. And presently, as was certain to happen sooner or later, King Lune said it was time for young people to be in bed. And tomorrow, Kor, he added, shalt come over all the castle with me, and see the estrus, and mark all its strength and weakness, for it will be thine to guard when I am gone. But Corin will be the king then, father, said Kor. Nay, lad, said the king, Lune, thou art my heir. The crown comes to thee. But I don't want it, said Kor. I'd far rather. 'Tis no question what thou wantest, Kor, nor I either. 'Tis in the course of law. But if we're twins, we must be the same age. Nay, said the king with a laugh, one must always come first. Art Corin's elder by fully 20 minutes, and his better too, let's hope, though that's no great mastery. And he looked at Corin with a twinkle in his eye. But, father, couldn't you make whichever you liked be the next king? No, the king's under the law, for it's the law makes him a king. Hast no more power to start away from thy crown than any sentry from his post. Oh dear, said Corin, I don't want to at all. And Corin, I am most dreadfully sorry. I never dreamt of my turning up was going to chisel you out of your kingdom. Hurrah, hurrah, said Corin. I shan't have to be king. I shan't have to be king. I'll always be a prince. It's princes have all the fun. And that's truer than thy brother knows, Cor, said King Loon, for this is what it means to be a king, to be first in every desperate attack and last in every desperate retreat. And when there's hunger in the land, as must be now and then in bad years, to wear finer clothes and laugh louder over a scantier meal than any man in your land. When the two boys were going upstairs to bed, Cor again asked Corin if nothing could be done about it, and Corin said, if you say another word about it, I'll knock you down. It would be nice to end the story by saying that after that, the two brothers never disagreed about anything again, but I'm afraid it would not be true. In reality, they quarreled and fought just about as often as any other two boys would, and all their fights ended, if they didn't begin, with Cor getting knocked down. For though when they had both grown up and become swordsmen, Cor was the more dangerous man in battle, neither he nor anyone else in the North Countries could ever equal Corin as a boxer. That was how he got his name of Corin Thunderfist, and how he performed his great exploit against the Lapsed bear of Stormness, which was really a talking bear, but had gone back to the wild bear habits. Corin climbed up to its lair on the Narnian side of Stormness one winter day when the snow was on the hills, and boxed it without a timekeeper for 33 rounds. And at the end, it couldn't see out of its eyes and became a reformed character. Aravis also had many quarrels and, I'm afraid, even fights with Cor, but they always made it up again, so that years later, when they were grown up, they were so used to quarreling and making up again that they got married so as to go on doing it more conveniently. And after King Loon's death, they made a good king and queen of Archenland, and Ram the Great, the most famous of all the kings of Archenland, was their son. Bree and Hwin lived happily to a great age in Narnia, and both got married, but not to one another, and there weren't many months in which one or both of them didn't come trotting over the pass to visit their friends at Anvard. The end of The Horse and His Boy. I hope you enjoyed the story. We will be beginning The Magician's Nephew tomorrow night. So this one, I know all of these I say are my top 7 favorites of the Narnia series. This one, I think it might be my favorite one. So I hope you like it. It's also, I think it's the shortest one. Unfortunately, I think it's going to go really quick because I'm going to be motivated to read it. So hope you are going to be looking forward to The Magician's Nephew as much as I am. And I don't think we have anything else to say. After Magician's Nephew, obviously, is The Last Battle. And then after that, like I announced last night, we're going to start what's it called? Somebody tell me. Somebody tell me. Kimberly. The Never-Ending Story. Da, 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 da. But we won't watch the movie until after the story's complete because we don't want to spoil it. Alora, I am so glad that you were able to listen tonight, and it really blesses me that you were there. So thank you for thanking me, but thank you because you really make it special for me. So God bless you guys. Y'all have a good night, and I hope that we get to see you tomorrow when we read The Magician's Nephew. God bless you guys.